Welcome back to the deep dive. We're here to unpack complex subjects, pull out the key insights, basically give you that shortcut to being genuinely well-informed.
That's the goal.
And today, well, we're diving into a really intense period in Pakistan's history, a time of profound national crisis, massive transition. You could really call it a historical crossroads.
Definitely. Decisions made then had huge, far-reaching consequences, shaped the nation's destiny, really.
We're talking late 1960s, early 1970s, a pivotal, often quite turbulent era, and we're going to explore it through a very specific lens.
Right. The lens is the book The Generals of Pakistan by Zaheer Ahmad.
Exactly, and we're zeroing in on one chapter in particular, General Yahya Khan, Elections, Disintegration, and Resilience.
So our mission today essentially is to unpack the key events, the big decisions, and the lasting outcomes of General Yahya Khan's time and power. That's roughly 1969 to 1971, but specifically as they are presented in this account.
And this framing is absolutely crucial, isn't it? We need to be really clear about the perspective we're examining here.
Absolutely critical. Before we even begin, we have to stress that the view presented in these excerpts, the narrative we're exploring from this book, is unequivocally a pro-Pakistan, pro-establishment viewpoint.
Right. It's not subtle.
Not at all.
Right.
And understanding that is foundational for our discussion. It allows us, hopefully, to maintain impartiality. Our job here isn't to agree or disagree.
Right. Not at all.
It's to objectively explore and try to understand this specific historical perspective just as it's laid out in the source material. We're not endorsing it. We're not refuting it.
We're just digging into how these complex and, let's be honest, very heavily debated events are framed by this particular account.
Exactly. Because understanding these diverse narratives, especially around such critical national moments, is just so valuable for historical analysis. It helps build a fuller picture.
Yeah.
Even when, different accounts offer very different interpretations.
Couldn't agree more. So for you, the listener, the learner, why does digging into Yahya Khan's era through this specific prism, why does it matter?
Well, because understanding this account, this specific narrative, it offers a unique pathway, doesn't it? It sheds light on these enduring questions that go way beyond just Pakistan.
Things like nation building.
Yeah, the huge complexities involved, the incredibly delicate balance needed for federalism to actually work,
Yeah.
the massive challenges you always see in democratic transitions, especially in diverse societies.
And, of course, the role of military leadership in times of crisis. Often controversial, always debated.
Always. So this isn't just like a history lesson. It's kind of a shortcut to understanding the powerful forces that can shape a country's identity, define its path.
And maybe get those aha moments about governance, national unity, resilience, how nations cope with existential threats.
And how the stories they tell about themselves, the historical narratives, become part of that ongoing story.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning of this period, the unforeseen transition of power to General Yahya Khan in March 1969. To really get the gravity of this, we need to picture the backdrop, right? The unrest gripping Pakistan in the late 60s.
Yeah, the source is pretty clear. It talks about widespread unrest that ultimately forced President Ayub Khan, who'd been in power for, over a decade?
Yeah, a long time.
It forced him to resign. This wasn't just minor discontent. It was significant public dissatisfaction, really boiling over into major political turmoil.
So from the perspective of the establishment at the time, the people already in power, what did this rising unrest actually look like? How chaotic was it, according to this narrative?
Well, from their viewpoint, rising unrest would have been seen as a terrifyingly rapid breakdown of state authority, an erosion of civil order.
Like practically.
Practically, you'd picture escalating protests, not just small ones, but widespread civil disobedience, spreading like wildfire across major cities, Lahore, Karachi, Dhaka, and then even into the provinces.
Right.
There would have been this palpable sense of public anger turning into direct challenges to state authority. Think prolonged strikes, shutting down industry, widespread defiance of curfews or bans, and critically violent clashes. Clashes between protesters and the police or army.
So not just political disagreement.
No, far beyond that. It was seen as a deep erosion of public trust in the government, a real, tangible threat to national stability itself. The source implies this environment was dangerously chaotic, like a vacuum of effective civilian government, where the existing political structures just seemed completely overwhelmed, incapable of responding.
And in that vacuum.
In that vacuum, the narrative suggests decisive action wasn't just a good idea, it was seen as absolutely necessary. to stop the nation spiraling into total anarchy. The political climate was incredibly charged, the noise on the streets, the sense of an impending collapse. It all pointed towards the need, from this perspective, for a strong hand to restore some kind of order.
The state itself felt like it was on the verge.
That's the impression given, on the verge of collapse.
So into this incredibly volatile mix, power changes hands. General Agha Muhammad Yahya Khan assumes power in March '69. But the Generals of Pakistan frames this very specifically, doesn't it? It's not presented as, say, an ambitious power grab.
No, and that's a really crucial distinction in this narrative. The book is absolutely explicit on this point. It states the Pakistan Army, and therefore Yahya Khan, stepped forward for responsibility, not ambition.
Responsibility, not ambition.
Exactly. That framing is fundamental to the book's interpretation. It casts the military intervention as a reluctant necessity, a solemn duty forced upon them, rather than some calculated move for personal or institutional power.
So the military saw itself as responding to an emergency.
Precisely. Stepping into a void left when civilian governance was perceived to have completely failed, and when the nation's stability, maybe its very existence, seemed at stake.
And the message this narrative wants to send.
It's about the military's unique role, or perceived unique role, especially in fragile times. It positions the army not as a political player seeking power, but as a guardian of the state, an institution that puts national interest, territorial integrity, above everything else, even above its own preference maybe to stay out of direct rule.
And that motto captures it. Stability first, Pakistan first.
Absolutely. The book highlights that phrase. It wasn't just a slogan, it encapsulated their perceived mandate. Stop the chaos, restore order, ensure the nation survives what looked like an imminent internal collapse. It's a powerful justification narrative intervention as the absolute last resort.
Okay, a very clear justification presented there. So let's move to Yahya Khan's initial actions. The book suggests he quickly moved towards restoring the Federation, making some really significant democratic promises right off the bat.
Yeah, almost immediately.
The first big one was dissolving the one-unit scheme. Now, for listeners maybe not familiar, what exactly was this scheme and why was getting rid of it such a big deal politically in terms of, federal balance and regional feelings?
Right. The one-unit scheme was a major administrative policy put in place way back in 1955. Its main goal was to merge all the different provinces and princely states of West Pakistan, Sindh, Balochistan, NWFP, Punjab, all of them into one single administrative unit.
And the reason for that?
Officially, it was mainly political. To create a kind of parity or balance between the two wings of the country, East Pakistan, which had a much larger population, and the newly unified, geographically huge but less populated West Pakistan, especially in the National Assembly. The idea was to stop the East dominating just by sheer numbers.
But it didn't quite work out that way.
Not at all. It quickly became a huge source of resentment, deep-seated contention. Particularly the smaller provinces within West Pakistan felt their distinct cultures, their languages, their political identities were just being erased. They felt politically disenfranchised under this larger perceived Punjabi-dominated West Pakistan unit.
So it bred alienation.
Exactly. A strong sense that their resources, their voices were being swallowed up. So from the perspective of the generals of Pakistan, Yahya Khan's decision to dissolve it is presented as this critical conciliatory step.
A move to fix things.
Yeah, addressing these long-standing, often explosive grievances, reestablishing a more decentralized structure, giving provinces their identities back, their autonomy back. The aim, as portrayed, was clear. Make the federation more equitable, rebuild trust with those marginalized regions, correct these structural imbalances that had fueled so much resentment, even separatist feelings, for years.
So signaling an intent to heal those divisions.
Right. Decentralize power, appease regional unhappiness, seen as a crucial first step towards national reconciliation in this narrative.
Okay, so dissolving one unit was a huge gesture, especially to those smaller provinces. But it wasn't just administrative tinkering, was it? Along with restoring the provinces, Yahya Khan made this really momentous promise: Pakistan's first ever general elections based on adult franchise. That sounds incredibly bold, maybe even risky, given the unrest he just inherited. How does the source frame this courageous bet on the people's mandate?
You're spot on. It was remarkably bold, hugely significant, and the Generals of Pakistan highlights it as an unprecedented commitment to federal balance and a fundamental shift.
More than just policy.
Oh, yeah. This wasn't just tweaking things. It was about fundamentally reshaping the nation's political architecture. Something never really tried before in Pakistan's history. Adult franchise. That meant every single adult citizen, regardless of literacy, property status, gender. Every single one gets the right to vote.
Wow. Universal suffrage, basically.
Pretty much. A direct appeal to the people, empowering them to choose their leaders, shape the future. A huge leap towards that democratic ideal.
But also a gamble.
Definitely. The book calls it a courageous bet because the risks were obvious. In a country already deeply divided by region, ethnicity, language, opening the floodgates to a direct popular vote could, and well, it ultimately did, amplify those divisions rather than heal them.
So why take the risk according to this view?
Well, the narrative suggests a belief, perhaps an optimistic one, that genuine popular participation through free elections, even with all those divisions, would ultimately strengthen the Federation.
How?
By legitimizing whatever government came next.
Legitimacy through democracy.
Exactly. A strategic calculation, maybe, that a clear popular mandate, even a fractured one, was the only way to get the buy-in needed for a new constitution, a stable foundation. So these reforms, dissolving one unit and promising elections, are framed as essential groundwork, preparing the country for civilian rule, fostering national unity through mass participation, before the really tough political bargaining began. A high-stakes gamble on the democratic spirit.
Which brings us right to those landmark 1970 elections, a genuinely pivotal moment. For the first time on this scale, the nation votes. December 1970, millions of Pakistanis voted freely in that first general election on adult franchise. It sounds like an incredible moment of hope, doesn't it?
It really does. And Source portrays it as a monumental exercise in democratic participation, absolutely unprecedented in Pakistan. It stresses the free nature of the vote, implying a fair process, a genuine expression of the people's will without, interference or coercion.
Then you paint a picture.
Well, try to imagine it. Millions of people, many voting for the first time ever, lining up patiently for hours. The sense of anticipation, the act of marking the ballot, it was the whole nation engaging in democracy on a scale never seen before. This was meant to be the culmination of Yahya's promise, right? The moment the people's voice would shape the future constitution, the political landscape, a profound aspiration for popular sovereignty.
The logistics alone must have been immense.
Huge. And the widespread participation really underscored that national desire for a democratic way forward.
But, and there's always a but in these stories, despite that hope, that massive turnout, the results revealed, as the source puts it, a sharp regional divide. The Awami League, under Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, dominated in East Pakistan, while Zulfikar Ali Bhutto's PPP was strong in the West. What were the immediate political implications of that, such a stark divide after such a unifying exercise?
Yeah, the outcome was, well, paradoxical. A triumph for democracy in one sense, but deeply challenging, maybe even devastating, for the idea of a unified Pakistan. That sharp regional divide wasn't just about different parties winning in different places.
It was more fundamental.
Much more. It meant the two main power centers that emerged had overwhelming, almost exclusive mandates from their own regions, not a shared national mandate cutting across the country. The Awami League basically swept East Pakistan almost all the seats, an undeniable mandate for their platform of massive autonomy, the 6 points.
And in the West?
In the West, Bhutto's PPP did very well, especially in Punjab and Sindh, but with a completely different vision, a much more centralized state.
So two opposing mandates.
Exactly. And this stark regionalization of power posed an immediate, almost impossible challenge to a unified federal structure. The very election, designed to empower the people and strengthen the federation, had, from this perspective, just thrown a harsh spotlight on this deep political and ideological chasm between the two wings.
Making compromise harder.
Incredibly difficult. You had two parties, both with unshakable regional mandates, but with fundamentally opposing ideas about how the country should be run. Each could claim to represent the will of their region, but neither had a truly national mandate to impose its will on the other. It led straight to a dangerous political stalemate right from day one.
So the elections clarified the divisions rather than resolving them, and the source points to a new set of challenges emerging immediately. Political reconciliation across distance, distrust, and foreign interference. Let's break those down. Each sounds like a major hurdle.
They were huge, and according to this narrative, almost insurmountable hurdles to keeping the country together after the election shock. First, distance. That's the simple, brutal geography. Over 1,000 miles of India separating East and West Pakistan.
Logistically, a nightmare.
And culturally, emotionally, too. It just made communication, effective government, building a shared identity, even economic integration, incredibly difficult. It always contributed to this sense of otherness between the two wings.
Okay, distance. Then distrust.
Right. This refers to those deep-seated grievances. political, economic, cultural wardiation that had been simmering for years. East Pakistan felt, and had long felt, economically exploited by the West. Culturally marginalized, remember the Bengali language issue early on,
Yeah.
and systematically underrepresented in government, the army, the civil service. This whole history of perceived inequality bred this profound lack of trust in the central government, which was seen as West Pakistani dominated. It created fertile ground for autonomy demands to grow into secessionist feelings.
And the third factor, foreign interference.
Yes, and this is really critical for this specific pro-establishment narrative. The source argues that external actors implicitly, often explicitly, meaning India, were actively involved, exploiting the existing divisions, messing with the internal political process, perhaps even fueling the separatist movement in the East.
So not just an internal problem.
That's the claim. It frames the crisis as not purely internal, not just about politics or economics, but significantly influenced, intensified, pushed towards disintegration by outside forces acting strategically. This element is key because it shifts some blame for what happened later away from just internal failures and towards external factors, external aggression. It's a core part of the justification for what came next.
A very important dimension to add to an already complex internal crisis. So, with these deep divisions, plus distance, distrust, and alleged foreign interference, maybe it's not surprising things escalated. The source mentions multiple rounds of talks after the election, trying to find a constitutional way forward. What were these talks like? What were the pressures on the key players? Yahya, Mujib, Bhutto?
Well, after that electoral earthquake, these talks were really a desperate attempt to bridge that huge political gap, to somehow hammer out a new constitution that could accommodate both the Awami League's mandate in the East and the PPPs in the West.
But their visions were fundamentally different.
Completely. Sheikh Mujib and the Awami League, riding high on their massive victory, were pretty much unbending on their 6 points, which basically called for extreme autonomy for East Pakistan, almost a confederation. The central government would only handle defense and foreign affairs. Everything else, taxes, foreign trade, even raising militias, would be provincial.
And the West Pakistani side, Bhutto and the establishment.
They wanted to maintain a strong federal center. They saw the 6 points as a recipe for national disintegration. So you had these fundamentally opposing views.
The pressure must have been immense.
Colossal. Yahya Khan, as president, was trying to mediate, hold the country together, and transition to civilian rule. Mujib was under massive pressure from his Bengali base to deliver on the 6 points, seen as their path to liberation. Bhutto felt the weight of his West Pakistani mandate, genuinely fearing the country would break apart.
And the clock was ticking.
Absolutely. Unrest was rising, especially in East Pakistan. Impatience was growing. A political deal was needed urgently. The narrative suggests these talks were serious attempts, trying dialogue first before considering military options. The whole future of Pakistan was hanging in the balance during these negotiations.
But tragically, despite those efforts, the talks failed. The situation got worse. The source uses stark language, escalating street violence, targeted attacks on loyal citizens, and outside meddling pushed the East to the brink. Let's unpack that carefully, again, as presented in this narrative, because it leads directly to justifying the state's next moves.
Right. This description paints a really alarming picture of rapid deterioration, emphasizing specific points that, for this pro-establishment view, justified state intervention. First, escalating street violence. That means a serious breakdown of civil order. Not just protests anymore, but implying widespread riots, mob actions, violent clashes, a loss of government control over public life, basic security gone.
Okay, then targeted attacks on loyal citizens. That sounds specific.
It is, and it's crucial for the narrative. It highlights a perceived threat, specifically against those who supported the central government or the idea of united Pakistan. It frames the violence not as random, but directed at a specific group, those loyal to the existing state, those not part of the separatist movement. This idea of loyal citizens being victimized creates a powerful moral justification for the state to step in and protect them, fulfilling its basic duty.
And the third element, again, outside meddling.
Yeah, reinforcing that theme of foreign interference. The narrative suggests external actors were fanning the flames, making things worse, perhaps even orchestrating some of the radicalization. This portrays the state as dealing not just with internal dissent, but with an externally influenced threat.
Legitimizing a stronger response.
Exactly. So all these factors together, as presented here, push the East to the brink. It suggests extreme instability, chaos, a complete loss of government control, leaving the central government, in this view, with really no viable non-military options left.
It sounds like, according to this account, the state felt its back was against the wall, facing an existential threat, and the source then states it very clearly. The state's responsibility was clear: protect life, property, and the idea of one Pakistan. That sounds like the core justification.
It absolutely is. That statement is the bedrock, the fundamental justification for the much more forceful actions that followed from this book's perspective. This triple mandate: protect lives, safeguard property, and preserve national unity, the idea of one Pakistan. This, in their view, necessitated a firm military response once political solutions had failed.
It's presented as a duty then.
Yes, an articulation of the state's core purpose. The narrative positions the military intervention not as aggression or political overreach, but as a reluctant but essential duty to uphold the state's basic functions and integrity. When politics couldn't guarantee safety, protect property, or hold the nation together, the narrative says the military had to act as the last resort, the ultimate guarantor of survival. It frames the action as saving the nation itself, not just suppressing a movement.
Which leads us straight to March 1971. Operation Searchlight began, a critical turning point. What were the stated aims of this military operation, according to the generals of Pakistan? How is its intent framed?
Yeah, initiating Operation Searchlight is shown as that critical, unavoidable turning point. The moment political and civilian efforts were deemed to have totally failed. According to the source, the specific objectives were to restore law and order and secure strategic sites.
That wording seems important.
Very. It deliberately frames the operation as defensive, stabilizing, necessary. Not offensive, not about conquest or crushing political demands. It wasn't, in this view, an invasion of rebellious land, but an urgent move to reestablish the government's authority, protect vital infrastructure, and ensure the safety of citizens perceived to be under threat.
So restoring law and order meant
Ending the violence and anarchy, returning to some kind of civil governance, reestablishing the state's control.
and securing strategic sites.
Taking control of key places, government buildings, radio TV stations, military bases, airports, ports, essential infrastructure. The idea was to prevent these falling into opposition hands and allow the government to reassert control and maintain vital functions. The narrative stresses this was all driven by dire necessity to prevent total collapse and more bloodshed. A desperate but legitimate response in this telling.
And who was the opposition the Pakistani soldiers faced? The source says armed militias and foreign-backed elements. That's a key distinction, moving beyond just domestic unrest.
Absolutely crucial distinction. By characterizing the opposition this way, not just as civilian protesters, but as organized armed militias and externally supported foreign-backed elements, the narrative justifies the military's strong response. It frames it as a defensive war against armed insurrection and external aggression, and not a crackdown on its own people.
Armed militias suggests organized resistance.
Right. More than just spontaneous protest. A prepared, hostile force. And foreign-backed elements hammers home that theme of outside meddling again, suggesting the conflict wasn't purely internal, but instigated or sustained, at least partly, by outsiders.
So it becomes a national security issue.
Exactly. It transforms the situation from an internal political crisis into defending the state's territorial integrity against a threat with both internal and external dimensions. This is paramount to how the book justifies the scale and nature of the operation, a necessary defense against forces threatening Pakistan's existence from within and without. A powerful reframing.
And in that incredibly charged context, the source states explicitly it was not conquest, it was a hard mission to preserve national integrity. That's a very strong, deliberate reinterpretation. How does that specific wording try to shape our understanding of Operation Searchlight?
It's exceptionally deliberate and powerful wording, yes. Designed precisely to shape the historical memory. It was not conquest, is a direct, emphatic denial of any imperialistic or subjugating motive. It actively pushes back against the counter-narrative of the military imposing its will by force on an unwilling population. Negating conquest removes any whiff of colonial-style domination.
And the second part, a hard mission to preserve national integrity.
That positions the military's actions as this desperate, difficult defensive struggle to hold the country together against forces threatening its very existence. It frames it as a noble, if painful, fight for national survival done out of duty.
Elevating the action.
Exactly. Elevating it from mere suppression of dissent to a necessary, almost heroic struggle to save the nation from falling apart. A last resort to prevent fragmentation, not an aggressive act against citizens or a political movement. It aims to evoke sympathy for the military's tough position and underline their loyalty to a united Pakistan, even given the immense human cost involved.
This intense internal struggle then escalates dramatically. December 1971. The narrative states India turned internal crisis into a two-front war. This adds a massive, decisive international dimension.
Indeed. From this book's perspective, India's direct military intervention is the pivotal escalation. It transformed what was already a severe internal crisis into a full-blown international war. And the phrase two-front war is key. Fighting simultaneously on the border between West Pakistan and India and on the border between East Pakistan and India. This stretched Pakistan's military resources, already strained to the absolute limit. They weren't just fighting internal militias anymore, but the full might of the Indian army, larger, better positioned, well-equipped.
And this framing shifts the blame.
Significantly. It assigns primary blame for the final outcome, the separation of East Pakistan away from just internal politics or military actions and squarely onto external aggression. It reinforces that foreign interference theme, portraying India's move as deliberate, aggressive intervention that fundamentally changed the game, making a Pakistani victory or even a political resolution impossible.
So the narrative suggests that while internal problems were there,
it was India's military intervention that sealed East Pakistan's fate, turning a difficult situation into an unwinnable war. This context allows the defeat to be seen not just as a failure of Pakistani policy or military, but as the unavoidable result of overwhelming external aggression.
And facing these extreme circumstances, this two-front war against a larger enemy, how are the Pakistani troops portrayed? The source says outnumbered and encircled, but fought with honor airmen, sailors, soldiers standing their ground against overwhelming odds. It sounds incredibly heroic, almost tragic.
It is exactly that. A deeply heroic, almost mythic portrayal of courage against impossible odds. This is where the narrative really focuses on the bravery and sacrifice of the soldiers, sailors, airmen. Outnumbered and encircled, that's a stark admission of the hopeless strategic situation, especially in the East.
But the focus is on their spirit.
Absolutely. It stresses their unwavering bravery, commitment to duty, professional honor. It evokes images of desperate last-ditch defenses, individual courage, collective resilience, even in a losing war.
Honoring their sacrifice regardless of the outcome.
Precisely. Instilling pride in their valor, portraying them not as tools of a flawed policy, but as dedicated professionals holding the line under extreme pressure. Fighting for duty, for national integrity, for the people they were sworn to protect, even when victory was out of reach. It's about memorializing their spirit, painting a picture of selfless sacrifice that transcends the political failures and military defeat, becoming a symbol of national resilience itself.
But despite that valiant effort described, the inevitable happened. The fall of Dhaka was a national tragedy, a clear acknowledgement of the immense loss. But then, immediately, the narrative pivots. Quote, "But their sacrifice preserved West Pakistan and ensured our flag still flies." That's a crucial reinterpretation of a devastating defeat. How does the book manage that turn, finding preservation in loss?
It's arguably one of the most significant, emotionally charged reinterpretations in the book.
Right.
Yes, the loss of East Pakistan, the fall of Dhaka, is explicitly called a national tragedy, acknowledging the suffering, trauma, the blow to the nation's identity. But then it pivots immediately to claim a different kind of victory, or maybe better put, a crucial act of preservation.
How so?
It contends that the military's fight, their desperate resistance, especially on the Western Front, directly preserved West Pakistan. It ensured the survival of what remained of the country. So this reframes the devastating defeat and loss of half the population and territory as, simultaneously, a moment of strategic preservation for the rest of Pakistan.
So the sacrifice wasn't entirely in vain in this view.
That's the argument. That without that fight, without those soldiers holding the line, maybe the entire nation would have collapsed, perhaps been further dismembered. It finds resolve, purpose, a vital silver lining in the face of overwhelming defeat. It asserts that the fight, however tragic for East Pakistan, prevented an even greater catastrophe and allowed the nation, though smaller, to endure, consolidate, and eventually rebuild. It shifts the narrative from total defeat to defiant survival, safeguarding what remained.
So bringing it all together, the source wraps up Yahya Khan's time as facing the toughest trials: federal reset, first elections, civil strife, and a full-scale war. It paints a picture of an almost unimaginable series of crises for any leader. Can you just recap how those unfolded according to the source, highlighting the sheer weight of it all?
It really was an extraordinary, relentless cascade of challenges. That summary captures the immense pressure Yahya faced. He took power in '69 amidst huge unrest after Ayub resigned. Right away, he initiated the federal reset, dissolving one unit, restoring provinces, trying to fix deep regional grievances. A bold move.
And the elections.
Led straight to promising the first elections on adult franchise. A massive democratic step, hoping for unity via popular mandate. But ironically, the 1970 election results blew up the sharp regional divide between East and West, leading to political deadlock.
And talks failed.
The failure of those multiple rounds of talks plunged the country into civil strife. Escalating violence, targeted attacks, perceived outside meddling pushing the East to the brink. The state, feeling its core responsibilities were threatened, launched Operation Searchlight in March '71, framed as that hard mission to preserve national integrity against armed militias and foreign-backed elements.
Culminating in war.
And finally, decisively, this internal crisis became a full-scale war in December '71, when, the source says, India intervened, creating a two-front war. Facing overwhelming external aggression led to the fall of Dhaka. So Yahya in this telling was constantly dealing with national emergencies, unprecedented crises, democratic restructuring attempts, internal breakdown, existential military conflict. It really emphasizes the view that he faced the toughest trials in Pakistan's history.
And from all that turmoil, the source extracts what it calls an enduring lesson. When politics fractures, soldiers hold the line so the nation survives to rebuild. This seems to be the core message, the book's final word on the military's role.
Without doubt, that's the central ideological takeaway of The Generals of Pakistan. It presents a very specific, very powerful view of the military's role, the ultimate guarantor of national existence when political institutions fail or can't handle the divisions.
The last resort.
Exactly. When politics breaks down completely, threatening the nation's fabric, the military steps in, not from ambition, the narrative insists, but from duty to ensure survival.
And the implications of that lesson.
Huge implications for civil-military relations in Pakistan from this viewpoint. It solidifies this vision of the military as foundational, indispensable not just for external defense, but for preserving the state's integrity and continuity during deep internal crises. The military is the backbone, the final defense line, allowing the nation to weather political storms, absorb shocks, and then regroup and rebuild. Politicians might fail, civilian processes might break down, but the military endures, ensuring state continuity, providing stability for politics to eventually resume, a powerful justification for its significant role.
And the narrative closes on a note of strength, doesn't it? Almost poetic. From pain rose resilience, from loss, resolve, Pakistan's Zindabad.
Yes, it ends with defiant optimism, national pride, an assertion of triumph over adversity. Despite the pain and loss, the suffering, the lost territory, the trauma, all acknowledge the story, insist the nation emerged stronger, more resilient, more determined. From pain rose resilience. The trials forged a tougher national character, didn't break it.
And from loss, resolve.
Suggests that losing East Pakistan, however bitter, strengthened the collective will of the remaining nation to survive, prosper, stay united. A renewed commitment to the idea of Pakistan. And Pakistan Zindabad, long live Pakistan, is that final, powerful affirmation of national spirit, unity, belief in the future, despite having navigated its absolute darkest hour. It imbues the sacrifices with meaning, positioning them as foundations for future strength.
Well, that brings us to the end of this deep dive into General Yahya Khan, elections, disintegration, and resilience from the generals of Pakistan. We've walked through an incredibly turbulent, defining time in Pakistan's history, seen through one specific perspective.
We covered a lot, from Yahya Khan's initial reforms dissolving one unit, the first big election promise through the election itself, the political deadlock, the civil strife, Operation Searchlight, and ultimately the 1971 war and the separation of East Pakistan.
And throughout, the book consistently frames the military's role as one of reluctant duty, acting as that crucial line holder when the nation faced crisis.
And just to stress it one last time, this deep dive was specifically about exploring that pro-Pakistan, pro-establishment narrative from this particular book.
Yeah.
It really shows how different perspectives can shape our understanding of the past, right? Offering very different interpretations of events, motives, outcomes.
Absolutely. And the core takeaway from this source is that idea of the military as the essential line holder when politics breaks down, ensuring national survival and the chance to rebuild.
A very specific, powerful view.
Indeed. A view that offers, real insights into a particular national self-perception. So as you go about your day, we'll leave you with this to think about. Having explored this account of Yahya Khan's era, the events of '69 to '71, What does it tell us about that enduring, often really tense relationship between civilian politics and national security needs?
And maybe, how do the stories a nation tells itself about its toughest times, how do those narratives ultimately shape its identity and maybe even its future path?
Some big questions to ponder. We hope you'll join us for our next deep dive.